everyone. My name is Jenni Brown with Brown and Dutton Law Firm, and our webinar today is focused on insurance and everything that you need to know in different types of insurance. My guest today is Michelle Faucher.
Faucher.
So fancy. Faucher with Liberty Mutual, and she's a sales representative. She's got a lot of experience with insurance, and she's going to tell us everything that we need to know about different types of insurance and why they're so important. So Michelle, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Faucher. I work with Liberty Mutual. I have multiple carriers that I can shop through, but I love taking care of clients for home, auto, umbrella, life insurance, the importance of insurance. Everybody needs to know what their coverages are, what they entail, and why insurance is so important in the ins and outs of it.
Yeah. So Michelle, something that happens in my line of work all the time is, people are typically going through divorce or some change in their life. And we'll have, a case where one spouse is usually the person who has always taken care of the insurance, whether it's car, life, whatever it is. And so people are coming in a lot of the times and they just don't know what they need. So I'd like to just take a few minutes to walk through different types of insurance and ask questions along the way. But let's just start with personal. Can you tell us a little bit about what type of policies are under the realm of personal insurance?
Personal insurance would be your home, your renters, your motorcycle, your auto, umbrella policies, and life insurance. That would be your personal side of insurance.
Okay, and so what exactly, so home, would that be whether you own or rent?
Yes. So the rent, you can even have a landlord policy if you have a long-term rental for a home and you have your primary home. That would be two different policies you have set up. And then if somebody's in that home renting, they would need a renter's insurance because that landlord policy is not going to cover their personal belongings. They have to have that type of insurance set up for renters to cover their personal items.
Okay, so for home insurance, what are some major questions that if I was looking for to either change my home insurance or to get home insurance in the first place, what are some questions that I would need to ask or that I would make sure that I need to know before getting that?
Where your liability coverage is, that is, the liability should be set at about 300,000. I wouldn't go any lower. You can go higher. That's if somebody were to get injured on your property, in your home, if they decided to sue you, it's going to cover that type of an event. If your dog bites somebody, that's going to cover that type of event. Your dwelling coverage, you need to make sure that your dwelling is set up for the types of things in your home, whether your bathrooms are basic, custom, kitchen as well, how everything is set up in the home. If you have a basement, if you're on a slab, you have a 2-car garage. So you want to make sure that all your dwelling coverage is specified for all those things to cover you if you had a total loss in the house, that your house will be rebuilt for what your replacement cost is. And then ask questions about your deductibles. If your roof is a lot older, people tend to think, okay, I'm just going to have a lower deductible or a higher deductible, but that is what you're going to come out of pocket with. So if you have an older roof, a lot of times if the roof is over 10 years old or 15 years old, you're not going to have full replacement. So you're going to be out of pocket for that ACV, which is actual cash value of what they decide when they come in and do an appraisal on your roof. If you have a claim, what you're going to come out of pocket with would be that deductible. And if your roof is actually actual cash value, you'll come out of pocket with whatever else that the insurance is not going to cover. Full replacement, anything that's newer than 10 years, you should be getting full replacement on your roof. So those are some questions to ask.
Is that something that you should be thinking about then when you're getting that insurance is, okay, if I don't have full replacement coverage on my roof, then maybe I should shoot for a lower deductible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And, or, some companies do go up to 15 years on the roof. If the roof is up to 15 years, there are a few companies that go up that high, but a lot of companies do 10 years and under. for full replacement on the roof.
Okay.
So definitely questions to ask
Yeah,
with.
and that's such a large expense, and it
Mhm.
happens, so unexpected and usually at the worst times for people. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of people don't know what they have in insurance until something goes bad, right? And then they're like,
Exactly.
"What? I'm not covered for that. I don't." So just understanding your policy is so important. Um, what about auto? What are some questions that people should ask for auto and make sure that they are covered for?
Definitely make sure that you have higher than state minimum. I totally recommend that. People think, well, I got to cut my costs. I'm going to have the state minimum of 25, 50, 25. What is that? That's 25,000 in liability, 50,000 overall in the accident, and then 25,000 in personal property. That affects everybody hears stuff about an insurance score. Well, what is that? That is how your liability limits are set up, how you're paying your payments. Now, I always recommend my clients be set up with EFT because you're less apt to forget about paying the bill if it's coming out of your account. Because if you have a lapse in insurance, that's going to affect your insurance score, and that's going to affect your premiums if you go to shop it around, because you don't want to have that lapse. Same with homeowners insurance. People think, oh, I missed a payment, or I'll just pay it next month. Those types of things affect your insurance score, so you'll end up having higher premiums when you shop it around, and so does the liability. I always recommend having higher coverages to help you in case of an accident, because you just never know. And do not have no uninsured motorists. There are too many people out there driving without, without uninsured motorists that cause bad wrecks. And then where are you at that point?
Yeah, that's scary to think about. And what about with the auto insurance? Something that you said made me think, how often should people be shopping around? So, I think people get in a situation where, especially in the midst of divorce, they might say, I'm just going to pick a company. We've been with State Farm for 15 years, so I'm just going to split my policy, right? I'm in the midst of a divorce. I don't want to spend time on that. How important is it that people are revisiting their insurance that they have and looking into those policies?
It's good to look every couple of years and see where your rates are falling. Sometimes your rates are generally going to go up 5% every year. So, there are people out there that do look at their policies all the time, every renewal, and then notice that. You can ask your agents to, do rewrites, see if that helps. There are things that could lower your premiums, such as doing a defensive driving course online. If you have a great driving record and you've never done that, I recommend talking to your agent about that and doing one of those. There's online courses that you just watch videos and take the test, and it helps your rates, lower your rates. Do those safe driving programs you see all over the TV about if you drive really careful, you get a discount. It's okay to sign up for those. People get scared about doing that, but if there's a way for you to lower your rates and save money, I recommend doing it. And it's just going to get you in the mindset of, okay, I have to drive careful. I need to continue to drive careful, because
Right.
I'll be less to get into an accident if I am continuing that path of driving careful, just because I had this little device in my car or an app on my phone that's saying, hey, I got to not slam on my brakes because I'm riding behind somebody so close. So those are the things that people can do to help their rates. And shopping it around, I always recommend every couple years, just call a few companies, look at your policies, see what kind of rates you get.
Yeah,
And,
I think that's a really good suggestion because I think people just get comfortable with what they're
mhm,
in.
mhm,
And then you might be missing on a huge savings that you could
exactly.
actually get for that particular policy. So let's jump into life because I think this is a question that comes up so often in our cases is what can you first tell us what is the difference in whole life insurance and what is the difference in term? What do those two mean?
Term insurance is, now you can get terms set up for 10, 15, 20, or 30 years. Term insurance, once that term is done, that insurance runs out. You can keep it going, but you're going to pay a whole lot more once that term is done. So term insurance will take you to that term and it's gone after
Okay.
that. Whole
So
life,
there's no cash value to that. So
there's
whatever
no
you're
cash
paying,
value.
it's gone once you're done.
Yes, or you can pay a lot of extra money to keep it going. You can, with some term policies, after a couple of years, convert some of that policy into a whole life product. So you can have a little bit left in your term and then have a whole life product, maybe for an extra $20,000 that you pulled out of that term policy, because you can convert those. Whole life will stay with you your whole life, builds cash value. It's great for younger people, great for kids. Get locked into something like that at a younger age when you're healthy, and then stay with that policy and continue to pay on it. And you'll have a product that builds cash value that down the road, the kids can turn into down payment on a house or a car. And at that point in their life, they're going to need a bigger policy anyway. I've written a lot of 20,000 whole life products for young kids. I just did 2 this week for a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old.
So how does that work? Let's use that scenario. So say you have 2 small children and you are thinking, okay, I want to do this $20,000 whole life policy. Is that paid out on a monthly basis? And what does that typically look like financially for the parents?
You can pay it out monthly, quarterly, in 2 payments, or in full every year. If you pay it in full, you'll get a discount. It's less money than paying it monthly. But the ones that I did, for an example, boys are more expensive than girls because
They're a little risky.
yes, and we tend to live longer. So I just did one on a little boy. He was 1 and his was $15 a month, and the little girl was 2 or 3 and she was $13 a month. So they're doing it monthly. They did a 20,020 pay. So this grandmother is going to have these 2 policies paid off in 20 years, and they will own the policy and they'll still have the cash value for it. So by the time maybe they're 20, there might be $5,000 in that cash value that they can turn in and use it for a down payment on a house or whatever they want, or they can hang on to it and keep going until they decide to cash it in, or just hang on to it for the rest of their lives.
And how do you decide, or how should someone decide if a term policy is better for them or a whole life policy?
Have the agent do quotes for you and see, what's in your budget. What do you think you can afford that monthly payment to be? And that, that'll help you determine where you want to be as far as a term goes. Term is less expensive than a whole life, especially if you're older. So I did a term policy on myself, and that was about, oh gosh, I wish I had written it down. That was probably a good $100 less than what a whole life product would have been for a smaller amount of death benefit.
The term policy.
Yes, the term policy. You'll probably end up, if you're, in your 30s or 40s, end up having to get a smaller death benefit if you do want to have that whole life product than you would for a term. And you can get a term without a medical if it's under 250,000.
And what about whole? Does a whole life insurance policy require a medical usually?
Not if it's under 250,000.
Okay, a whole or term, either.
Whole or term.
I think that, so often, and you and I have talked about this before, is I think that so often people think they put life insurance on the back burner, right? So they think, I'm going to do it later. I've got so much going on in my life. But something that I've learned, throughout the years, and I think that is so true for people, especially with the pandemic, no one is exempt from tragedy. No one is exempt from unexpected sickness. And so what would you tell people that know that they need life insurance, but they haven't done it just yet?
So you get insurance on your car, you get insurance on your house. Why aren't you having insurance on your life? What's going to happen if, you have young kids and your husband passes away? How are you going to maintain that living, that taking care of your children, that mortgage payment. People aren't thinking about those things. And then when it happens, they don't realize, oh my gosh, I should have paid that monthly premium of $50 a month or whatever it may be, as opposed to having that cable bill or buying from Amazon every week or things of that nature. I know somebody that she just bought a house, brand new mom. They had a baby. The husband went to Lake Lanier, spent the weekend on the lake with the boys. A friend called her the next Monday and said, "Hey, did he make it home all right?" And she's like, "What are you talking about? He's with you." They had a little party and he fell off the boat and hit his head and drowned. And nobody knew. Took him 2 weeks to find him. She lost the house. She lost everything because they did not have life insurance set up. They kept saying, I'll just do it later. We'll just do it later. There's no reason. And that's the worst thing you can do. I mean, if you're going to have insurance on your car, your house, all these other things, why not have it on your life? Why not have it on your family's life? You can't predict anything. We don't know. You can go to the doctor tomorrow and find out you have cancer. And at that point, you're uninsurable.
Right. And I
So
think so important too is that people think about it once they have that diagnosis, right? Once they find out, oh no, I'm having heart failure, or oh no, I have breast cancer, and then they can't get the insurance, and it's too late. And one thing is true is that we are all going to die. We just don't know
mhm,
when. So
exactly.
you're protecting your children, your spouse, whoever it is that's most important to you, with getting those life insurance policies. Um, what
More
about,
often than not, people will cancel those policies and pay their cable bill as opposed to paying the life insurance. And you and I talked about that.
so what's more important, The Bachelor or your future? Um, what about disability insurance?
Disability insurance is definitely important. And two, and we didn't touch base on this. People think I have group insurance through my job. I don't need anything outside my job, but that's not true because if you got laid off, if you got fired, if that job just became no job at that point, that insurance is not going to go with you. That insurance is group insurance and cheap for a reason because it won't go with you. If and I had a family end up calling me because the husband lost a job and they had no more life insurance. Now, life insurance, you can also, if you get diagnosed with something that's chronic or terminal, you can pull from the policy. Now, if you end up on disability, those group policies will only pay out a certain amount of insurance for disability. Where if you have that individual one set up, you'll be set up a lot longer
So
as opposed.
from a whole policy, would that be a whole insurance policy that you would be pulling for, or that would be if you had?
Either or, you can pull from either or. If you got diagnosed with something terminal or chronic, then you can pull from either policy
Okay.
to help you along. Now, you can pull up to 90% on some of them, and then, the rest stays in the policy in
So that's
order to help you with bills.
an important question to ask. If
Mhm.
when you're figuring out, I mean, I have term insurance and I've never even heard of that. So to ask that when you have,
It's a living benefit.
yeah,
It's called.
what living benefits are included in this insurance policy?
Mhm. Exactly. And also what your group policy involves, because people think, well, I have that, I don't need anything else. But I have both. I have my group policy and I have an individual. I actually have two individual policies outside my job. So if I ever were to leave my job or get laid off, I have those policies that I will continue to pay on and keep because I know how important they are. And I'm older, so they're going to be more money if I try to get another one.
So doing it as early as possible is a huge financial benefit to the individual.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, when you were talking about divorce, that's the one thing when I went through my divorce that my ex and I decided to set up was life insurance because we had a young son at the time. And, you know, if something happened to him or me, that we could continue with the schooling and help him along with whatever he needed down the road because one of us is no longer there.
Yes, and that's so important. And we really encourage all of our clients to do that, especially because if, let's say, a mom has primary physical custody and she works, but she's getting child support from the father, and
Mhm.
say it's $1,500 a month. If he dies, that $1,500 a month is no longer payable to her. So what we try to do is make sure that he has an insurance policy that will satisfy his future child support obligation, but also the other way around, just like you're saying, because if something happens to her, then
Mhm.
he's going to have the children and that he's going to need that financial support too. So at the end of the day, it's a benefit to your children to make sure that they can maintain, that they're not dealing with the death of their untimely death of their parent, but also then a financial hardship.
Exactly, exactly. And too many times people don't see that and that happens and then they're stuck in a situation where they can't maintain that for that child. And it's, you know, it's heartbreaking because they don't feel like the insurance is that important.
And that's something that I think is important to touch on too, is that you can get life insurance and policies, and you mentioned this earlier, on your children. Um,
Hmm.
and too often we see these tragedies where a child has died, and then a family has to, put a GoFundMe page, or they're not anticipating those expenses that when a child dies, that your family is going to have.
Hmm.
Or if a child, is very sick, and then, one parent's out of work or whatever. So, can you get both whole and term on a child?
Absolutely. Term will be super cheap and then they can convert some of it into a whole life product, you know, in a couple of years, pull some of that product out of there and turn it into a whole life. Seen that happen with a lot of teenagers. Parents get it on their teenagers and then down the road they convert some of that product to a whole life product. And then they still have the term and the whole life. But
Right.
yes, yes. And it's super cheap to get it now for them as opposed to later. And you can get an insurance policy for a child 2 weeks after it's born.
Okay. Yeah, that's such good information to know, because I think a lot of the times people think of, um, the first thing they think of is saving for secondary education, right? For college.
Hmm.
Uh, but to me, this is just as important to make sure that that they have what they need. And I also like the fact that with that hold, that you can draw some of that money out if you need
Yes.
to.
Yes.
Uh,
Once you turn in the cash value, the product is no longer. So if they had maybe a $20,000 whole life, they're 25, 26, and they decide they're going to buy a house. They have $6,000 of cash value built up. That's just an example. It's not, you know, it's different for everybody, but they have $6,000. They can cash it in and have that $6,000 to put down as a down payment on the house. And then at that point, they can get another product or another whole life. There's still be, it's not going to be as cheap, but is still, they're still at a young age in their 20s that they could get a whole life product still, or a term policy, 30-year term, because now you have a mortgage. You're
right.
going to need to pay off that mortgage if something happens to you and you're newly married, and you know you want to make sure your spouse is set up if something were to happen to you. Get a 30-year term because usually a mortgage is for 30 years.
And then that puts you into your, mid 50s. And so hopefully you'd be saving along the road and be somewhat self-insured, but you have that security until you get to that point in your career. Let's talk about umbrella a little bit.
Okay.
We hear that term a lot. Clients hear that term a lot. And so often they're like, what is that? What does that mean? Can you tell me a little bit about umbrella policies?
Yeah, umbrella policies, they're the extra liability coverage for a client if something were to happen and they caused a wreck, that they were at fault and somebody decided to sue them. That's that extra liability coverage that's going to protect them if somebody were to sue them. For an example, you're going to have 250, 500 liability coverage on your car. in order to have an umbrella policy. Say your teenage drivers are driving around, they get in a bad wreck, their friends are in the car with them. That parent of that friend decides, your son just injured my child, I'm going to sue you. That protects them. That extra $1 million of liability protects that parent and pays that parent, that's suing. So it protects them. It protects you for slander. There's so many things umbrella protects you on, that if somebody was bad mouthing your business, or you in particular, it's going to protect your business, yourself, for that slander. It's so important to have it if you're a business owner or if you have teenage kids that are driving. I always recommend it for my families that have teenagers, because you never know what your teens are doing out there in the car.
Yes.
And if something were to happen and they ran into somebody, even that other person in that other car, it's going to protect you, where somebody is not going to go after your assets or your home and take all that from you because your child caused a bad wreck and injured somebody so bad that they have to have all this medical treatment that you can't afford. So I
Right.
totally recommend umbrellas for parents, for people that own businesses, for anybody. I mean, because you never know. I mean, if you're a safe driver, great.
Is it tied to a specific policy? So is it your umbrella policy is tied to your
Auto.
or
Mhm.
your home, or is it
It's tied to your home, but usually you have to get it if you have auto. So it's tied to your auto, but it protects your home too. So say you have 20 people on your deck and the deck breaks and all those people get injured and everybody decides to sue you, it's going to protect you from that situation too.
Yeah. And yeah, I think of a situation where like a kid is on Snapchat or, whatever the new TikTok or whatever it is that they're doing, and driving. And
Mhm.
they, hit a pedestrian or they run into a car or whatever. And then, yeah, the family is sued. So to have that additional coverage beyond that auto coverage is so important.
Oh yes, definitely. And I mean, people don't realize too that nowadays everybody's sue happy and they can go after your paycheck, they can go after your home, everything, your 401k, everything you've built up, if you don't have that extra layer of protection. And it's so important to have, especially if you're a business owner, or you have a nice home and you have a 401k and you have savings and you have a teenage driver. We can't predict what's going to happen with them out there behind the wheel, and
Yes.
it's really important to have.
You like to, we hope that we know what's
We
happening.
hope we know, but we don't know what they're doing.
And we've been teenagers, so we know that we don't actually know what they're doing. Well, let's talk a little bit about accident and obviously health insurance, I think is better known, but what is accident?
Accident, I don't do a lot of health. I don't do health insurance, but we do have a supplement, almost like an AFLAC. So we have supplemental insurance that is that extra layer, like an AFLAC policy would be. If you have accident or some kind of diagnosis, and AFLAC has the cancer, the accident, the hospitalization. We do have an accident um, supplemental insurance that we can help people with on top of their regular health insurance.
Okay, so that's just additional coverage in the
It's a
event that something happens. And is that
it's
different?
supplemental. Yeah. It's a supplemental insurance. So where your regular health insurance doesn't cover, it's the additional coverage for
Got it.
you to help pay those bills.
And what about disability insurance? I've seen, that come across a few times where, there's different policies and some pay out different amounts based on your income. Do you do very much disability insurance?
I don't do a lot of disability insurance, but I know talking to people with life insurance, you can end up being disabled and pulling from those policies as well. And the group policies don't cover you that well or that much for very long with those group policies. So that's another reason to have the life insurance outside your job, because if you were disabled and you couldn't work and you have to pull from those policies, it's good to have something outside of that, because they run out through the group insurance after not very long. It doesn't last you very long with the group insurance.
So I have just a few more questions. I think that something that our clients tend to ask, especially when they're going through the midst of divorce and they're maybe setting up their own life insurance policies for the first time, is how do I determine what coverage amount is appropriate for me for life insurance? Um, are there any go-to things to think about when you're deciding on that?
Yeah, you can do an evaluation. You can have the agent do an evaluation with you. What your mortgage is, how much you owe on your house still, how many kids you have. Typically, they say it costs about 250,000 to for each child to raise a child. So if you have more than one child, you might need that $1 million or $500,000 to cover the expenses of raising a child if the spouse were to pass away. And then you just need to look at your expenses, what you have, your house, your mortgage. If my spouse passed away, what do I owe on this house that I would need to take care of and pay off so I don't have to worry about that extra expense? The burial for that spouse, your bills, you can break them all down and just add that up and decide, what is the best thing and the best amount of coverage that I need to sustain my living if my spouse were to pass away and I don't have that extra income coming in.
And as an agent, is that something that you help walk them through and kind of
Mhm.
figure out that number? So if they call and say, "Hey, I want a life insurance policy for $100,000," are those questions that you would ask and say, "Okay, well let's talk about this and figure out if that is the right amount of coverage for you."
I do. But then you also run into situations where well, I can't afford that much. So, okay, let's look at what you can afford right now and let's look at the numbers that way and see what we can get you that will be affordable for you and still give you some kind of life insurance coverage. So you have something other than nothing,
Right.
because having nothing is not going to do you any good if you pass away or your spouse passes away. It's not going to help your loved ones.
And I think that'll be comforting. That's comforting to people to know that, they have someone helping them to figure out what is the amount that they need, but also what amount can they afford, and working that from both angles and figuring out what type of insurance is appropriate for them.
Right. Right. I mean,
Uh,
because we also know with insurance too, when you're breaking apart those insurance policies because they're going through a divorce, they no longer have that married discount. They're having to sometimes, there's situations where the spouse will still pay the insurance, and they're still on the insurance, but that one car is housed in lit somewhere else. So you have to break that down in the policies, where the policies will get more expensive because one car is at one household and the other car is at another household, but that person might be paying for the insurance still because it's in the divorce. But that's stuff you have to break down with the agent, talk to them about it and see, because once you lose that married discount, that's another discount that goes away because you're no longer married, but you have to have insurance. Can't drive around without it, and it's good to protect yourself.
Yeah, and that brings up something that I wanted to mention, is that it's so important too that I think that people who are insured ask their insurance agency agent about what discounts there are and what they qualify
Mhm.
for. Because so often, I know this has happened to me, is that I'll call and they'll start telling me about discounts that I had qualified for probably 2 years in the past, but had never submitted the information for, because I didn't even know that that was a discount, whether it's having an alarm system, or for your kids, I don't know if they do the good grades for their kids anymore, but
Mhm.
there's so many little discounts that aren't publicized, right? And they don't know. So I feel like that's an important question to ask.
Definitely. And I mean, even the military discount on the auto, there's some companies that offer the military discount on auto. So it's not just the USAA. I mean, you have to ask them that question too. Hey, I was in the military. Do I get a discount? So it's a good question to ask, and definitely, hopefully the agents are asking all those questions as well when they're talking to the client to make sure that, they are getting all the discounts that they should get for
Yeah.
sure.
So do you have any last pieces of advice for people who are looking into insurance, what they should ask for, what they need to be looking into? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your information back up so I can share it so that anyone who would like to can contact you about insurance. Oh, and one more question. Can you write outside of Georgia?
Yes, I'm licensed in Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina, as well as Georgia.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, any pieces of last advice?
Yeah, I would, talk about your coverages, make sure that you have really good coverages, make sure you have the uninsured motorist, all those different things that you need to have. Don't be afraid to pay a little more to make sure that you are covered well. People think, I gotta save money, I need to save money, but in the end, if that accident happened and somebody is suing you or you're having to pay out a whole bunch of medical expenses, where did that get you having that state minimum coverage? So make sure that you're talking about those coverages and looking into, what is it going to be if I do up my coverages to make sure I'm better protected. Just have those conversations with your agent, and don't think that paying a little more is a bad thing. Company, make sure the company is great with their claims department. That's an important thing to do. Because more oftentimes than not, claims, if you do have those situations, your car needs to be repaired, you want to make sure that the claims department is top notch and that you're getting the best customer service for that as well. And always talk to your agent before you call and inquire about a claim. People do that all the time and they don't realize those are recorded. Even if it comes up a zero claim, they inquired about it, so the claims department thinks that there's a possibility there's a claim going to happen. Like with a roof, I mean, people call their insurance company all the time and say, hey, I'm thinking I need to do a roof claim, but I'm not sure. And then that's recorded, and when they shop around, that zero claim is popping up because they inquired about it. So
Yeah.
talk to your agent about things before you do it.
Yes, I think that's great advice because so often people don't even know what they're covered for. This actually happened to me over Christmas as I lost a ring that my husband had given me for my 5th-year anniversary. And I had called our agent because we have a jewelry policy and it wasn't covered. I thought it was. I didn't add it, but not knowing that, and if I would have called claims and claimed the missing ring, it wouldn't have been covered, but that would have been a ding. So I think that's something that is not natural. But what is really important, I think, is having that personal relationship with your agent so that they're the
Absolutely.
first person you think about versus the 1-800 number.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a lot of times why people end up going with the companies that do have that personal agent, as opposed to those other companies that all you're getting is an 800 number, and when you call them, you're getting a different person every time, so you're not getting that one-on-one personal touch that you do with your own agent that can take care of you year after year.
Yeah. Well, Michelle,
Definitely.
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm
Thank
going
you.
to turn off our videos, but I'm going to put our contact information up for a few minutes so that it's available for anyone who wants it. But I really
Okay.
appreciate it. And I look forward I know I'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm really glad that you had me do this with you, and it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.